Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you to the Sustain team for inviting me along. I'd like to qualify something that Richie said earlier on. I have over 20 years experience in industry, but only 3 of those has been in the steel industry. The majority have been in the automotive industry as a design engineer and product designer. So it just give you some context as to why I'm not going to talk about the science of steel making over the next 15 minutes. I'm going to talk to you about circular economy, but also about what circular economy actually means, and in reference to something that Peter said earlier on about this disrupting the balance, how the linear economy has been part of that disruption of the balance that we see today, and the reason why we're in such a mess. So what I will do is go through some of the ideas around linear economy comparison to circular economy, and give you some examples of what Celsa is doing to try and accommodate some of these initiatives. Firstly, the circular economy to me is a global economy which is circular by nature. It's simple as that. But more personally, I see it as a strategic design solution for restorative development, based upon understanding of the full life cycle of what we do and how we do it. We only have one of these planets, and so far we as a species aren't very good at looking after it. So what can we do to change? And this is where we're trying to get with circularity. But before we delve into circularity, we need to understand what we have at the moment, what we currently have. And we currently have an addiction to a linear economy, to the idea of extraction of raw materials, to make something with them, move them around the planet, use them for a short period of time in general terms, and ultimately wasting the valuable resource at the end of life. So converting that into a future which is circular, a future which is prosperous, in the simplistic terms, we want to eliminate the concept of extraction of raw materials, and we want to eliminate the concept of waste. Waste does not exist in the circular economy, so we need to understand how we eliminate that concept completely. Before we delve into the circular economy, we need to understand a little bit more about the linear economy and what it is and where it's come from, and ultimately it's been around a long time. As soon as humanity started to stand upright, we started to use raw materials. We started to take wood and stone from the environment and use them for tools and weapons, and that really is the linear economy. And we haven't really changed a whole lot since that time. All we've done really is we started to develop a sense of superiority about who we are and what we are on the planet. We started to go and explore the world and exploit the world for those natural resources, because we felt actually that these something we could do something with, particularly in Western society. We started to develop a complete disconnect from nature, and we use science and religion as the excuse for doing so. And then we started to provide this very perverse view of value with those resources. And I'll speak about our friend John Locke in a little while. And all we've really done since this time is just become more efficient at exploitation. We've mechanized the process, we've mass produced the process, we've automated the process, and now in the current age we're digitalizing the similar process, which was designed in a linear form and continues, including our low carbon technologies, are all designed and developed within the concept of a linear economy, where we extract raw materials we use for a short period of time and we dump it and waste it at the end of life. So there really isn't the collaboration or the coordination between the current linear form and the circular future. Even the work that Elon Musk and Tesla are doing is all based upon over 3 million years of thinking. There's no real change in that mindset. It's still linear by design. There's a couple of reasons why the linear economy is so addictive, and one is going back to our friend John Locke, where he was an English philosopher who was seen as the godfather of intellectual property rights. And one of his philosophies was that nature in isolation had no inherent value to humanity. It's only when labor was added to those natural resources was any value assumed. So in that formed the idea of property, the idea of ownership and property, and therefore if we added some labor to some natural resource, we could therefore do what we liked with that natural resource, and we could sell it for a cash profit. And so that became the foundation of our economy, our linear economy, and which meant that there was only assumed value at the point of sale. When we sold something, we exchanged the artifact or the resources for cash value was the only time there was any assumed value with that. So that focused our efforts onto selling more and more stuff. We also ended up looking at it from a very siloed perspective. We focused in on what we could do ourselves, our organizations, our individual, even departments, and we tend to continue in those siloed forms as we move forward through the ages. And it just means we've all heard the expression that it's not my job, it's someone else's, and so therefore we lose that continuity of supply and throughput. We also tend to not ask questions about what we've done in the past, the way we've done things. We tend to rest on our laurels or tend to get comfortable in the status quo. So we tend to latch onto that legacy knowledge and not really ask questions of the way we do things. Is it the right things? And so when we add all this stuff together, you end up with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risks, and a huge amount of impact, also with huge contradictions, lots of unintended consequences, and massive unforeseen costs. We also end up having a very misguided understanding of what life cycle is, and we tend to, you'll often hear people talk about we have a full life cycle system, we have a cradle to gate or cradle to grave system. Ultimately, cradle to gate means that as soon as it leaves the front gates of the factory or the back gates of the factory, it's no longer our responsibility. It's someone else's. We passed on to our customer, or the consumer, the person in the street. It's no longer anyone's responsibility but theirs. Equally, when we talk about cradle to grave, well, ultimately we don't really mind what happens to it as long as it's not ours anymore, and if it goes to landfill, then that's the best we can hope for at this point. So I'm not suggesting we need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to redesign the wheel, because the way we've done things so far isn't really conducive to a prosperous environment, a prosperous society, one that can be seen to be beneficial to the future generations. And we need to just give ourselves an opportunity to think differently about what we do, how we do it, and ultimately look at the opportunities that are available in front of us and grasp those opportunities. As organizations, we can, and I include academic organizations in this, we can start to ask questions about our full life cycle, our full impact, what we do, how we do it, and how we can do things differently going forward. We need to understand that some of the answers to these questions may be difficult to hear and to listen to and to absorb, but ultimately we need to use those as the opportunities for moving things forward. And one of those opportunities is looking at the circular economy, the truest extent of a circular economy, because unfortunately the circular economy has been kind of hijacked, let's say, by waste management sector over the last 5 years or so. The circular economy is not just about recycling. It's about much more than just recycling waste and recycling materials. The current form of circularity and recycling is just a reaction to the mess we've created with a linear economy. It isn't necessarily designing in solutions that are more robust and actually can deliver those full life cycle the benefits. So we need to understand where we are and drive forward beyond it. In essence, the circular economy is simply just mimicking natural systems. I know Peter and had mentioned, what does nature do? Well, actually, this is what we need to learn. We need to learn what nature does and understand how we can benefit from this, because nature, in essence, doesn't produce any waste. It produces food for new life. So by translating that into the technical process, the technical metabolism of industry, we need to, at best, or at least, we need to start looking at how to produce feedstock for new development. But we need to understand how the complexity of the system works in nature, and reflect that in what we do and how we do it in industry. So there's a number of different philosophies out there looking at this and trying to make sense of this. But they're all about symbiotic restorative solutions. So understanding that none of us exist in isolation, so why should we work in isolation? We're all part of a wider system, so we need to understand how the system can start working together to benefit the system. And all of these philosophies are based upon the understanding and the performance of resources throughout their life cycle, but looking at it from a systems thinking perspective, making sure that we're not just talking about steel making in isolation, we're not talking about decarbonization of the steel industry, we're talking about the wider system and how how the steel industry, the foundation of steel, can be part of that bigger system. But we need to engage with that system as well to make sure that we're doing things in a more conducive way. Just a slide on the donut economics. This is obviously a philosophy or a principle that's been put out there over the last couple of years with from Kate Raworth, and it just gives you a good framework for understanding the impacts that we have, and ultimately what we need to do to adjust our activities on a global basis. And we want to make sure that we exist in that safe and just space for humanity, and we're not overstretching ourselves, shortfalling for the social foundation, but obviously overshooting to the impacts, beyond the impacts of beyond the opportunity for the planet to recover for itself. And these are two slides just to represent from considering we had COP26 last month. Now we're looking at the difference between when the Kyoto was set out in '92 and the Paris Agreement in 2015, and the fact that we haven't really achieved very much. I haven't got detail for the 2021 figures at this point, but it's a good understanding of how we can assess our ability and our impacts on society. So Celsa as a company, people who don't know Celsa is in the UK is a steelmaker, but we have 100% use of our steelmaking is using electric arc furnace, so therefore we use scrap as the main feedstock. Over the last 6 months or so, the chairman of Celsa Group has embraced this concept of circularity a lot more vigorously than had been done in the past, and actually realized that Celsa as an organization, on a group basis, we have the opportunity to recycle at this stage nearly 9 million tons of scrap every year across the group. What we want to do is build up the perspective of actually offering that as a service solution to the wider supply chain, and be leaders in that circular supply chain, and ultimately build a net positive future for future generations. And so what we see ourselves at this stage is an opportunity to transition those industries towards full circularity. So in the UK, we're trying to address this. We're looking at where we are now, what we do now, and where we want to go in the future. So where we are now is effectively the #1 recycler of scrap material in the UK. We can take 1.2 million tons a year, process that into 1 million tons of product. But the trouble is, what we're doing now is we're providing a commodity steel product into a linear economy by recycling scrap. And so therefore we're battling on a global scrap market to keep that material in the UK. And we have a very siloed working relationship with our supply chain, both with the scrap merchants, scrap producers, but also the building contractors and the building users. So it's, again, very linear, very solid working. So we want to try and address that and look at a future which is a lot more collaborative, where we can start to facilitate the idea of circularity and collaboration across the supply chain, and develop solutions that not only can help Celsa but help the wider supply chain be more circular, and develop those circular economic opportunities that really can build on the true principles of circularity, and not just about recycling, but looking about the whole system change. So therefore we have an opportunity to look at multiple opportunities for benefit, not just monetary but social benefit as well, and we can also build in different business models and such that can benefit all. So this is just an image from the Cradle to Cradle certification and the guys of the European Environmental Protection Agency. So it's looking at where we are now, and I say the royal we need to look at society generally and industry generally. We need to understand that we do have an addiction to the linear economy, and how we can start to transition from that linear process to one that's more circular, and one that's ultimately restorative and prosperous for future generations. I would encourage anyone to start looking at circularity, looking at the principles of the circular economy, and particularly the BS 8001, because these are all part of what we need to do to transition and move beyond the idea of just decarbonizing our operations, and recycling materials, but actually looking at how we can develop the systems to be more robust going forward. So I'll finish with this. Always think full life cycle, because stuff doesn't disappear. Just because we send it off, we get rid of it, doesn't mean it's gone. Waste to me is just bad design. We've designed in the inefficiencies, the ineffectiveness. Let's redesign the entire system to be a lot more beneficial. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to collaborate, because collaboration is key, and circularity is definitely a team sport. So that's me. So I'll finish up there. And